All right, welcome back to Empowered Esquire TV. I'm going to begin by addressing the elephant in the room. So we're later than we usually are, right? Even this 8 o'clock ish, 9 o'clock ish time is later than our usual. But I did that because it is a holiday weekend, and that means that just like everyone else, I'm going to be out and about, right? So I wanted to accommodate that. Now, with that being said, it is after 8 o'clock at night. And I am not, I repeat, I'm not going to be drinking coffee, okay, at this time of night and then be up until 2 o'clock in the morning. So you're going to have to excuse me in advance if I misspeak or have a moment of lapse, okay, because we're not drinking coffee at this time of night. And I've had a long day. It's a beautiful weekend, and I've been out and about all weekend enjoying this weekend, okay? Alrighty, so now that we have addressed all of those things, and I thank you in advance for being so understanding and so amazing, I also want to say while we're talking about thanks, thank you for being so understanding last week. Last week, I had a moment of transparency where I just pretty much came to you all and said, I'm tired and I just can't this weekend. And I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who commented, everyone who liked the post, and just express your support and your understanding. As you know, YouTube is a hobby for me, right? And so it comes after all of the other things that I have to do. So I'm so appreciative of the community that we've built here. All right. I think that is it. All right. So we are first going to dive into the very unfortunate Uvalde. I don't know if I'm saying it right. So I'll just say Texas incident. And then we are going to dive into the also unfortunate Buffalo incident. And we're going to take both incidents from a perspective that isn't being thoroughly discussed at the moment. Because as you know, on this channel, we like to really get into the legal information and really understand the legal workings of a lot of these cases that we just kind of discuss colloquially. So, with that being said, hello to Octavius Prime. Hello to I Am Queen Newton. Hello to True Strong. Hello to Deneen Bay. And hello to everyone who is in the bushes but might not be in the chat at this moment. How are you? Took a moment there to take a sip of my beverage. You guys know I always have my sparkling water, and I have one with a little bit of caffeine in it today, hoping that it'll give me some boost because, as I said, I'm not having coffee at this time of night. Okay, we're just not doing that. So let's get into what I want us to discuss about the Texas incident. Now, everyone has discussed this incident, right? And so at this point, we have an understanding of the victims and the perpetrator and all of that. And I want to say, my condolences to the families that lost someone in Texas. So, what we're really going to talk about is what went wrong here, and not necessarily from the aspect of what went wrong with the perpetrator and his life, because there's so many different avenues there, right? But from the perspective of what went wrong with law enforcement. If you are not aware, law enforcement took quite some time to really actively get into the school to assess the situation. And so we're going to discuss that today. We're going to discuss their response time, their training, and whether or not legally there is something else that could have been done. Y'all, I can already feel that I'm dragging. Oh, no, 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 no. So I'm going to do my best to not drag. Okay, because I'm already feeling it. I'm feeling it. Listen, I've been out all day. And then not only was I out today, it wasn't even like that. Oh, I ran some errands. It was, I've been out, y'all, like walking up and down in the park with Mac, having lunch outside, playing games outside. Like, I had a day. Ooh, okay. We're going to try to make it. So I'm going to share my screen and show you an article that kind of outlines how law enforcement responded so that we can have a dialogue about that. All right, so you should be seeing my screen. You are perfect. So, Texas police chief who delayed a response did an active or completed an active shooter training in December. So, apparently, officials are saying that the police chief mistakenly believed that there was no active threat and that he had taken this course in December, which taught him how to compare and contrast an active shooter incident with one in which there is no active violence occurring. Okay, so let's delve into that. So apparently police the police chief decided to wait as opposed to, confronting the perpetrator while he was at Robb Elementary School. It goes on to say that this particular chief has only been the chief since 2020. So let's keep that in mind, right? That's not an excuse or an explanation of any sort, but this is not a, you know, 10 or 20-year vet. Yes, he may have been an officer for a while, but as far as being a police chief, he has only been a police chief since 2020. So imagine 2 years in your position and you have this sort of incident happen. There are many police chiefs who go halfway through their career before they have to address something like this. So do keep in mind that this is a relatively new police chief. I'm just seeing now. Octavius Prime said, "Oh, you're fine, empowered. I'm counting on you." Wow, no pressure. Let me drink my uh, slightly caffeinated, carbonated beverage. Hold on. Okay, back into it. So apparently, he stopped officers from entering the school. Let's find out why. So, Stephen McCraw, head of Texas Department of Public Safety, says it was the wrong decision. Okay, fine. But he also says that the police chief believed that the shooter had barricaded himself and that the children were not under an active threat. So he had to have gotten that information from somewhere, right? So let's for a moment let's for a moment be as unbiased as possible, right? This police chief had to have gotten that information from somewhere. I don't find it likely that he just invented that information, right? Or that he just made it up. It sounds more feasible that he got that information from somewhere, right? And mind you, if he's not in the building, uh-oh. Oh, hold on, you guys. So on top of being just drained from the sun, mind you, I had a great day. Now I'm choking. Y'all, something is trying to stop me from Look, now I have hiccups. What? Now I have the hiccups. This is insane. Okay, so now. So, he had to have gotten that information from somewhere. Do we know where? No. But again, in having that unbiased moment, we have to discuss that he's acting on information he got from somewhere. And we have to be nice enough to give him the assumption that this is a reliable source of information wherever he got this information from. Okay. Now, the article goes on to say that instead of sending officers in, the police chief decided to try to find keys that would let him into the school. So when I hear that, that sounds like instead of bum rushing in and perhaps causing more of an altercation because he believed that there was not an active altercation going on. He was trying to quietly enter the school to diffuse the situation. That's what I'm getting from that. Okay, let's continue. In the midst of the shooting, at least 2 children called 911, one of whom begged for help. One girl called 911 more than 5 times, McCraw said. Let's have that conversation. Now, when someone calls 911, is there a guarantee that their 911 call and whatever it is that person is expressing in the 911 call is actually going to make it to the ear of the police chief? No. So when we talk about this situation, yes, there is room for growth in the decisions that the police chief made. However, we need to unbiased, remember, in an unbiased manner, I'm going to keep saying that, take a look at this situation on a whole and realize that there is room for improvement in many other areas. Now, most jurisdictions do not have this streamlined 911 process that we think they have. So, as a person outside of the process, you probably think that you make a 911 call and that somehow someone like a police chief, they are privy to the contents of your call. And that is not how streamlined it is. In many jurisdictions, it is nowhere near that streamlined, right? So you may be having victims or persons in the school calling 911 and saying we need help, but is that reaching the ear of this police chief? Probably not. Probably not. Should it? Yes. So there's room for streamlining there as well, because if that information did reach the ear of the police chief, then perhaps he would have adjusted his decision. All right, let's continue. Federal agents were told by local police to wait and not to enter the school, and then decided about half an hour to ignore the initial guidance and find the shooter, said 2 senior federal law enforcement officials. Okay. Let's discuss that very briefly. So, I do find it interesting that the federal agents were so willing to grant so much deference to the local police. That is not something that always happens. That is something that I find to be interesting with this, right? To imagine that there were federal agents there and they granted so much deference to the authority of the local police. Again, I think another area with room for improvement, because federal agents have a lot more experience with these types of situations than your local police does. So them deferring to the local police, again, says to me more room for improvement, right? Now, from a fair perspective, I'm sure the federal agents would say, well, technically, it was not our jurisdiction as of yet, et cetera, et cetera. However, in an emergency situation, I think it more prudent to have federal agents taking the lead on that than local police, when federal agents probably have more experience. Just my thoughts. All right, I'm in the chat. Hello to Doug. All right, the world's most requested moderator. Hello to Nappy Yankee. Hello to Quack 13. All right. Let's continue. Oh boy. Okay, so now they're getting more into the curriculum, the course that he took, which for our purposes, I don't think we're going to get too much into that. But I will put the link to this article in the video description so that you have the opportunity to go and review it and take a look at it yourself. If you're interested in kind of finding out more about the course that the police chief took, okay? But really, we're going to focus on what occurred in the response to the situation at the school, okay? So now, oh, hello to Midnight Green. I think you're a newbie, so welcome. welcome. Um, Welcome to the struggle bus that I am having today. You would think that when I know I'm supposed to go live today, I would like have a relaxing day. Y'all, I am struggling. Okay. I'm so drained from that day that I had today. I think I walked probably about, yeah, I'd say about 2 miles. Yeah, about 2 miles walking the waterfront with Mac. And for those of you who don't know, Mac is super acidity. Okay, and he's not gonna sit there and just walk endlessly. About 10 minutes in, he decides that he's done walking and he has to be carried the rest of the way. Wow. Listen, that little dog is unbelievable. He's currently exhausted too. He's curled up on his blanket sleeping. Mm-mm-mm. What a day. Hello to Caramel as well. Alrighty, so let's have an open discussion about, as I said, the response and the way that law enforcement responded to this. Now, I see Quack 13 saying that it was protocol for them to defer to the chief. Again, we all understand that the federal government is in a higher position of power than local government. So, my question again is there room for improvement there? Federal agents have more experience with this type of situation than local police does. Period. Point blank. That's that, right? So is there room for improvement in the protocol there then? Shouldn't federal agents take the lead in that kind of situation? So tell me, what do you think? Right? Before we go in on the police chief, because again, relatively new police chief, right? We know that he's only been chief since 2020. So let's have a conversation about what could have been done all the way around. So give me a one in the chat if you think that federal agents should have taken the lead on that response. Give me a two in the chat if you think no, it was appropriate to defer to local police. Okay, I'm seeing ones in the chat, ones in the chat. I mean, and as you've heard, I'm not going to sway you, but as you've heard, I don't think it would have been a bad idea, right, to have the federal government take the lead on this. And again, Quack 13, we're discussing what can be changed. That's the entire point of this conversation. We are discussing what could be done differently. So we're not discussing why they did what they did. We are discussing what could be done. This is the last time I'm going to explain this. What could be done differently? There's no point in us saying they couldn't do that. What does that do for our edification? We are discussing what could be done differently. Okay, right. So again, federal agents are going to have much more experience with that. So that's something that can be done differently in the future. Whatever their protocol is, then that can be and should be addressed. This is what we have to do to get a different result. You guys, the definition of insanity is for us to continue to do the same thing, to continue to have these school shootings, to continue to lose young lives. And then we say, well, that's just how it works. That's protocol. What? That is the definition of insanity. We have to discuss what we can do differently, how we can change things so that we save lives. That's the entire point here. So, again, I think, right, my humble opinion, that that's something that could be done differently. You should automatically say, you know what? The feds have more experience here. Feds, we want you to take the lead on this. You have more experience in this kind of situation than we do as local police. And they had the feds there, right? So why not allow them to take the lead in an area where they're going to have more experience? Now, let's talk about the police chief and the he's only been the chief since 2020 thing. As a police chief who is relatively new, I think yet again, Another opportunity was missed to defer to someone with more experience. So let's have this conversation. If you had been police chief for barely 2 years and then something like this happens, would you seek counsel? Would you seek advice? Give me a one in the chat if you think, if I was a police chief that was that new, I would seek some sort of more experienced counsel. Give me a two in the chat if you think no. As police chief, he had to rise through the ranks. So he had to have a certain level of education and experience. And I think that he did the best he could. What do you think? And then we'll get into my humble opinion. Okay, I'm seeing some ones come in. Okay. So my humble opinion is to err on the side of, as a police chief that was relatively new, and maybe he did and we're unaware, right? We're going to say that maybe there was someone he turned to and we're unaware, right? But if not, I think what would have been wise in this situation would have been to turn to someone with more experience, perhaps the former police chief or something, right? Because 2 years is pretty new on the job to have to deal with this type of situation. Again, that's putting to the side any police experience he had before becoming chief, because I don't care what anybody says. The experience he had before becoming the chief versus experience as police chief is two totally different ball games. So, yes, he may have been on the force for however long before he became chief, right? But he was only chief for 2 years before having to confront and call the shots on such a complex situation. So, I see that many of you put a one in the chat. I see Deneen Bay said he did the best he could, but he needed help. And I agree with that. So, what happened here, from what we have seen, is really a combination of a lot of things. First, you have a local police department that more than likely does not deal with this type of situation very often. Second, you have a relatively new police chief. Third, you have a police chief who believed at the time that the situation inside of the school was not active. So, all of those things combined to give us the response time that we now know occurred during the incident, and also all of the decisions that happened therein. And it's so important to discuss these things, as I said, on a large scale, right? Stepping outside of it and looking at all the moving parts, because it makes things make so much more sense. So much more sense. Yeah, that works. My tired brain is kicking in there, so I hope that works. So I'm going to open the floor now. Should I open the floor for calls now, or should I wait until after we talk about Buffalo? I'm going to wait until after we talk about Buffalo. After we discuss Buffalo, I'm going to drop the link in the chat and do call-ins. I really want to discuss SCOTUS today, but I may have to move SCOTUS to tomorrow. That may be something I have to do, because I'm dragging. I'm dragging, y'all. So if you have any further questions about Texas, drop that in the chat, and then we're going to move on to Buffalo. With Buffalo, we're going to discuss hate crimes, and I actually have, courtesy of KKC, shout out to KKC, a copy of the manifesto of the Buffalo shooter, alleged shooter, whatever, right? And so we're going to take a look at that, and it's insane. Okay. Quack 13 says, how could he think that they still heard shots being fired? Listen, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I'm not going to try to assume how he could have thought whatever he thought. Mr. Mojo says, his experience as a lieutenant or field supervisor is more valuable in that situation than as a police chief. Okay, good point. He says it's an active shooter, so everyone should know what to do after Columbine in 1999. Well, I don't know that for sure. Now, we would think that everyone should have better response to this after Columbine, right? We should think so. But as I'm sure you know, Mr. Mojo, that type of training is not federally regulated. So every state, every jurisdiction, yeah, they're sending, similar to how they sent this chief to that training in 2021, right? Everyone's sending their officers to training, but not necessarily the same training, not necessarily the same information, not necessarily the same techniques. So that's going to vary. Doug says, hit the like button. Yes, y'all, hit the like button. It is free and it is a free way to support the channel. And Doug has also provided in the chat the Cash App link if you'd like to donate to the channel. All right. Midnight Green says, why wasn't he trained for such a situation? So, Midnight Green, he allegedly did go to a training in 2021 in which he specifically was trained in regards to active shooter situations versus hostage situations. So, the understanding is that he did go to a training. However, that training is what led him to make the decisions he made because he believed that it wasn't an active shooter situation. All right, Mr. Mojo says Surround and Call Out was canceled after 1999. You can't wait and let people die while you sit there. Good point, Mr. Mojo. Again, here it looks like this police chief, he made a decision based off of information that he received. Again, we don't know from where, but based off of information that he received. Taking a sip of my beverage, and then we're going to go straight into Buffalo. All righty, let's get into discussing what occurred in Buffalo. Oh, actually, you know what? I have another link. I have something else I wanted us to discuss before I get into Buffalo. Let me put this up very quickly. I wanted us to have just a quick conversation about this, and I really hope that the article pulls up properly and they don't restrict it. Let's see. No. Okay, this should be fine. All right, so I want us to have this conversation very quickly and then get into Buffalo, which this conversation kind of flows with Buffalo, right? It's along the same vein. So let me share my screen. All right, so let's have this conversation. I want us to talk about gun restrictions and gun control. And this is something, particularly when we do the call in portion of the show, that I really want to give you all the floor to discuss because I want to hear your thoughts and your questions and comments and concerns on gun control and gun restrictions, and really the larger conversation of whether or not gun control works. Because whenever we have this sort of incident, we always turn back to that conversation, right? That gun control conversation. And should we restrict gun availability and gun use? And so the question that is begotten from that is, does it work? If we do restrict the accessibility of guns, does that work? So let's look into that. Alrighty, so the 5-minute fix. Do gun restrictions work? All right, so quick conversation about the Second Amendment. Okay, the Second Amendment does refer to the right of the people to bear arms. However, it does mention a sort of local militia. Okay, so it does specifically say a well regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So some interpret that as there's an individual right to bear arms. Some interpret that as no, there's only a right for each jurisdiction to protect themselves? That is a debate that we do not have time for today. So let's get into it. Okay, so one of the things that is often argued when a person is against gun control is that if you allow people to have guns, then you will deter shooters and other types of criminals, because if they know that the person that they are attacking has a gun, then they have fear that that person will, defend themselves. So let's see, do good guys with guns save lives? There are certainly instances where that has happened. Okay, interesting. Hours after the massacre in Texas on Tuesday, top Texas Republicans said the solution is to arm the teachers. Interesting. The Post's Philip Bump looked at recent mass shootings and found that the presence of an armed guard did not stop recent mass shooters from killing people in seconds. So did they even answer that question? So the answer to that question is sometimes. Okay. Next question. Well, next statement. Chicago has a lot of gun violence too. That is correct. This is the argument that stricter gun laws in liberal cities do not stop killings. Interesting. The Post fact checker looked at this in 2017 after the mass shooting in Las Vegas and found that despite Chicago's tougher gun laws, most of the guns came from other states. Pause. Let's have this conversation. Even if we were to regulate guns by law, that would not stop the sale of guns because people would still sell and acquire them illegally, right? So that's another concern. Yes, we could put all these restrictions, but will they work when we know for a fact that there is a heavy black market for weapons? Interesting. All right, so I'm in the chat. Doug says, similar to what I was just saying, when there's a black market, there's no such thing as gun control. Acadia, we tried to ban alcohol and drugs, right? And look how that went. Look how that went. Marquise Dillinger, hello, welcome. Marquise says, well, these attacks are at churches, schools, and grocery stores, not places people go armed. Well, that's not necessarily true, Marquise. So I'm not sure where you're from. However, take it from a girl who was raised in the South. Okay, I grew up with people who take their gun everywhere. Okay, they do have their gun in the church, at school, at the grocery store. Yes. Okay, on my law school campus, there were people who were armed and they were permitted to be armed. Um, so yes, people do. Some people take their guns everywhere. All right. Hello, hello, Real Talk TV. How are you? All right, so let's dive back into the article now. Do restrictive gun laws effectively prevent mass shootings? There are so many guns in America that any restrictive gun laws could take years to make a difference. Even then, it's hard to measure why violence goes up or down. That's a good point. The United States has far more guns per person than any other country. I wonder why that is. Why do we have so much more weapons than everybody else? I'm gonna have to look into that. That's curious. Hmm, that's very curious. Certainly, some gun control policies help to reduce violence. The Post's fact checker reported in 2017 that certain limitations, such as requiring a license to have a gun, well, I read that sentence wrong, but okay. So, so it does help to make sure someone has a license. Okay. But it found the evidence is thin that tougher gun laws would quickly or dramatically reduce rates of gun violence. That makes sense. Okay. But then they say, well, that's no reason not to act. Okay. Interesting. So we're going to leave that at that. I just wanted us to quickly have that gun control conversation because I was curious and I wanted to see what everyone thought. So let me do a poll. You guys know I love to do that. Give me a one in the chat if you think we need tougher gun control. Give me a two in the chat if you think we need to arm everybody. All of those teachers should have been armed. Let me see what you think. In the meantime, I'm in the chat. Hello to a lady. A lady says mandatory criminalization of automatic weapons. My opinion says the movie industry. Not sure. Are we saying the movie industry is what makes people more violent? Doug says, I saw a YouTuber on live order a weapon. Wow. And 2 weeks later, it was delivered to his house. What in the heck? Wow. Wow. Mr. Mojo says we probably have more weapons than everyone else because of our Second Amendment right. That sounds feasible. That sounds feasible. B Buccaneer says the assault weapon ban under Clinton worked just fine. That is until Bush II let it expire. That's an interesting point. Okay, so we have B Buccaneer saying yes, we need to restrict it. We have quite a few people saying we need to just arm everyone. Okay. Let's see. So we're having a mix here. Empress Kaya saying we need universal background checks. That could help. Eliezer, let me take a pause. Yasharala. Yeah. Eliezer Yasharala saying yes, we need to arm everyone. Quack 13 also saying something similar to what B Buccaneer said, that we need to reinstate the ban on certain types of weapons. All right. Hello, Lakotis. Look, I don't know if I said your name right. Let's see. Deneen Bay says, with the climate of where we are in mental health issues, I'd say one. Now, everyone, that is a large part of our issue with weapons. On a whole, Americans and mental health is in a decline. And that is connected to rise in violence. I don't know how many of you have taken notice of that, but deterioration of mental health and a rise in violent behavior are correlated. And so a lot of what we see in the US is mental health is deteriorating. So violent actions are increasing. I'm going to tell you what I saw the other day. The other day, I'm crossing the street and there is a what appears to be a homeless man, an African American man, walking down the street as well. He is arguing with himself, so there's obviously some mental health issues going on there. And as he's walking, there is a woman just minding her own business, just kind of walking along the sidewalk as well. Now, the man has in his hand what looks to be like an iced coffee. As the woman walks by him, and I'm seeing this, she doesn't say a word to him. She doesn't look at him. She doesn't touch him. She doesn't bother him. So she's not doing anything to him. He's just having this argument with himself, as I said, obviously showing signs of mental health issues. As she walks by him, he takes the top off of the cup of his drink and throws the coffee on her. Just throws the drink on her. And as she's standing there in shock that this random man she doesn't know just threw his drink at her, he takes the cup and throws the cup at her face. And then begins to call her like all sorts of like expletives and names, and then starts like laughing and arguing with himself again. Now, was she hurt in this instance? No. But what if that man had a weapon? Or do you think he would have did something further to that woman if he had had a weapon on him? So absolutely, mental health and a rise in violent behavior are correlated. My opinion says the gun culture. Wait, let me go back to it. Shoot, I lost it. Where is she? Oh, why am I calling you a she? I don't even know if you're a she. I'm so sorry if I gave you the wrong pronoun. My opinion says The gun culture of the USA is tied to the history of the movie industry. Remember the Western? Oh, yes. Okay, that makes sense. So my opinions made a very good point that perhaps it's tied to our movies and our, the old Western movies. Okay. A lady says it could be tied to capitalism. All right. Marquise does not agree with arming teachers. He says that it just makes everything more dangerous. Okay. Let's see. Hello to let me see your transcript. Real Talk TV says, what are the other constitutional rights outside of guns and hate speech? And can the amendments be amended? So that's a large question. There are many other rights, far too many for us to sit here and list. Okay. And yes, amendments can be amended. That is also a totally different discussion that we would have to have another time. All right. I am in the chat. All right, let me see your transcript updating us that the House has passed a new restriction on guns, but the Senate has not passed it as of yet. Okay. Doug reminding us to hit the like button. Nappy Yankee has an interesting proposition. So Nappy says, how about the minimum age of owning a gun should be 25 years old when your brain is developed? And then arrest and criminalize sellers. So I guess sellers who are selling illegal weapons, right? Basically charging them for the crime. That could be a good point. It could be a good point. I think they are already punishing sellers as well when they're able to catch them, right? Because distributing and selling firearms illegally is a crime. Eliezer says more broken homes are also associated with more mental health problems. Interesting. Okay. When you just look at the data on the young people involved with crime, the rate is higher in single parent households. Interesting. So, um, I did not grow up in a single parent household, so I cannot speak to that experience. I, y'all, my cup runneth over with parents. Okay. I have four, uh, technically, I have four, right? I have parents who split up and then they both remarried. Okay. So I say that to say this. I technically grew up in a broken home because I did not grow up with my biological mother and father, but I was not in a single parent household. And now I'm going to follow that up with this. Even children who grow up in broken homes that are not single parent households still have emotional and psychological traumas to address from the brokenness of the original parental unit. Okay. And I'm going to leave it at that. Queen Keish says there needs to be a mental health exam. That could help. I like that. I like the idea of mental health examination for you being able to carry a weapon. I'm not against that. Let's see what else we got here. Eliezer said, what if she had a weapon as well? I don't know. That's a good question. What if she had a weapon? I mean, I was shocked. I stood there shot and she was mortified. I just thank goodness he didn't do something worse to her. All right. Octavius Prime going down his resume of his Second Amendment rights. Acadia says most people don't understand the process. Just because you order a gun and it is shipped, it does not go to your house. It goes to the FFL that does the background check. Thank you for letting us know, Acadia. I do not know what the process is for owning a weapon. I'll tell you that openly. I don't know. Hi Jennifer, how are you? Real Talk TV says, am I crazy to say that robots might help to detect mental illness better? It's not crazy, but I don't love it. And I'm going to tell you why I don't love it, Real Talk. I don't love that idea because robots don't have the same discernment. It's very black or white, black or white. And as human beings, we know that things are so much more complex, especially with mental health. So I don't really love that idea. Hello to Tiffany Jackson. Tiffany Jackson says, I believe that white male identity is often steeped in gun ownership. Interesting. In parts of the US. To be a real man slash protector of a home is often backed by having access to a gun. Th- Oh. That's interesting. So actually, Tiffany, what you're saying connects to what my opinion said, right? Because remember, in these old westerns, the cowboys were all usually Caucasian men, right? So maybe there is a culture in the US of Caucasian manhood and manhood kind of in general, right? Being connected to the owning of a weapon. That might be a thing. Might be a thing. You guys might be making a psychological connection there. Jennifer says teachers shouldn't be armed or don't need to be armed unless they're undergoing psych evals prior to. I mean, as I said, I'm not against the mental health eval. I'm totally not against that. Totally not against that. Okay, Acadia says we were raised to hunt from a very young age. I think this is an urban versus rural issue. That's also a good point, Acadia. I love this discussion. So, yes, some may be viewing this as a black and white issue, but it could be an urban versus rural issue as well, right? Because I was mostly raised urban, right? But then as I went into adulthood, lived in more rural areas. And yes, it is definitely more so of a norm for children to be trained in how to use weapons and for weapons to be in the home in a rural area. Absolutely. And that's in every home. That's in a black home, in a white home, in a Hispanic home, in an Asian home, right? So Acadia makes a very, very good point. Very, very, very good point. Alrighty, so I am going to transition. My goodness, y'all. Still on the struggle bus. Let me take another sip of my caffeinated drink. We're gonna transition into Buffalo. Y'all, I'm gonna try to make it. Okay, I'm gonna try my best to make it. So let's do it. Let's transition into what I want to discuss in regards to Buffalo. So when we talk about Buffalo, again, another unfortunate event, and my condolences to all of the families, may all of the victims. Who unfortunately lost their lives, may they rest in peace. When we talk about Buffalo, we're going to discuss hate crimes. We're going to discuss what a hate crime is. And then we're going to take a look at the actual manifesto of the alleged Buffalo shooter. Again, courtesy of the amazing and wonderful KKC. All right, courtesy of KKC. If you don't know who he is, you should totally check out his channel. He's awesome. All right, let's do it. Let me pull up my little link that I have for you all here. Is this the right link? Oh, it's actually a picture. Hold on. Let me I'll read it to you. So, first, let's discuss what is a hate crime under federal law. Okay. So, under federal, wait, I just noticed somebody made a Joe Clark reference. You guys are hilarious. Okay. Under federal law, a hate crime is willfully causing injury to any person or attempting to cause injury to a person because of their actual or perceived race, color, religion, or national origin. One more time. Under federal law, a hate crime is willfully causing bodily injury to a person or attempting to cause bodily injury to a person because of their actual or perceived race, color, religion, or national origin. So let's break that down. This means that when someone when they want to cause an injury to another person because of a race or ethnicity or religion that they think that person belongs to, then they have committed a hate crime. Now, all of these nuances that I'm pointing out matter, okay? When I say they mean to, when the code says willfully, yes, that person has to intend to, they have to mean to. Now, when I say because they think, and when the law says perceived, that means if I look at a person, if I say, you know what, I have a problem with all people who are purple skinned, and I look at someone and their skin is like bluish, purplish, and so I think that they're purple skinned, even though technically their skin is blue, and I attack them because I think their skin is purple, it is a hate crime. Even though technically that person is not purple skinned. When I looked at them, I perceived them to be, I thought them to be purple skinned. And so whatever happens there on out is still considered to be a hate crime. Okay. Now, every state also has their own hate crime laws. But what we just discussed is the feds' law on hate crime. Glad we had this talk. Now, let's take a look at the manifesto. Didn't I send it to myself? Maybe I didn't. One moment, everyone. I thought that I sent it to myself. No, I did not. I did not. Let me send it now. It's a pretty large file, so I'm hoping that it'll actually let us open it. It's 180 pages. Craziness. But let's see. We have a question from Acadia. Acadia says, "What do you think about what the FBI is preying on and radicalizing young men to do attacks?" Interesting. I don't know much about that, so I'm going to reserve any statement on that. Why has oh, there we go. It came through. All right, so now I'm opening up. Oh, and then we can download it. We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to download it. It's 180 pages, y'all. I don't know how far we're going to get. I imagine we're only going to get like maybe 20 pages in. Maybe. And then I'm going to open up the lines, let you all call in, and then we're going to get out of here. Queen Keish says, "I don't understand why he would travel 3 hours away to a black neighborhood. He had a whole map." Hold on, y'all. Give me one moment. Let me get back to the chat. He had a whole map and plan. He had some help too. So as we go to the manifesto, I think he addresses that. He specifically chose that spot because it was more populated with black people. He specifically chose an area that was more populated with black people. He allegedly committed a hate crime. That was his entire purpose. Hello to Black Anonymous. How are you? Alrighty. Do I have a picture of a fair use disclaimer? No, I don't, but fair use, and it is in my video description. If that's what you mean, let me see your transcript. Hello to Rockin' with the Truth. We are having a wonderful evening. Yes, we are. All right, so let's get into this. Whew. Let's get into this manifesto. So I'm going to press share. What I'm going to do is share my window. That should work. There we go. It works. All right, here we are. So we are on the first page of the manifesto of the alleged Buffalo shooter. Wowza. Okay. So he starts by having, mind you, we're not going to focus on some of this other stuff, right? Because it's not relevant to us for what we really want to dig into. But here he goes on a bit of a rant about white fertility allegedly being low. All right. And he continues to go on that rant. Here towards the end of page 2, he introduces himself. He says his name is Peyton Gendron. He says when he was born, and he pretty much says that he identifies as a person who is white. Okay. Still not what we need. So notice that we're going to get to what we need. Okay. That's not it. And by what we need, I mean the conversation we want to have about what occurred and the group that he specifically targeted. Oh, by the way, someone had mentioned in the chat if he worked with anyone. He alleges here himself that he is the, as you see here, sole perpetrator of the attack. That's his allegation. All right. I am going to keep moving. Okay. So here we get into some of what we want to discuss. So he is specifically responding to this question. Why did you target those people? His answer is they are an obvious, visible, and large group of replacers from a culture with higher fertility rates and strong, robust traditions that seek to occupy my people's lands and ethnically replace my own people. It would have eased me if I knew all the blacks I would be killing were criminals or future criminals, but then I realized all black people are replacers just by existing in white countries. So this is why he allegedly committed the act that he did. Because he has this belief that all black people in the United States are occupying a land that they do not belong in, and that they are replacing white people and reproducing quicker than white people are, and thereby taking over. That's the entire premise on which he did this. Now, again, remember the definition of hate crime that we discussed. This is quintessential hate crime rhetoric. He is specifically saying that he, again, I'm going to say allegedly, he allegedly, right, committed this act for the purpose of targeting a specific racial group. All right. Let's get into something else that I found to be interesting. Let's see. I'm going to keep on. Is this it? Hold on. Here we go. So now, throughout the manifesto, he mentions replacers, which is what he defines as people of color in the United States, right? He also mentions immigrants as replacers and that immigrants are replacing white people. So, of course, that begs the question, well, what about white people? Because as we know, when we talk about the history of the United States of America, Caucasians as well as Africans are both immigrants here. Neither of us are what could be considered to be native or indigenous to North America. So now he answers that question. So the question is, by living in the United States, weren't you an immigrant yourself? His answer is yes. And it seems we immigrants seem to bring a whole host of issues. Although the land technically belongs to its native people, the United States now belongs to whites because removing whites from all of the United States is impossible. They are simply rooted too deeply in the land. The same thing applies with other white countries that are not in Europe. Does that make any sense? Does it make any sense to acknowledge that you yourself are an immigrant because you came from somewhere else, but then to allege that for some reason you're more deeply rooted in this land than all the other immigrants? Could somebody make it make sense? How is he any more deeply rooted in this land than the descendants of the slaves who built everything that we're using? So he's more deeply rooted in this land than the descendant of a slave that built the same train system being used, than the descendant of a slave who created all of the wealth that is now JP Morgan Chase and all these major banks that we're all using. I mean, this quote unquote logic is totally just out of left field. Anyway, so again, just further evidence that this was a planned and intended hate crime, right? He obviously intended to attack Black people for a specific reason. So let me go back to why he chose the area that he chose, because someone wanted to discuss that. Okay. So why did you choose blank place? Well, blank place has the highest Black population percentage in this zip code. So that answers the question. Someone had a question about why did he drive 3 hours away? This is why. He specifically chose an area that had a higher percentage of Black people. Okay. Now, as he goes on in this manifesto, I'm going to do some scrolling, right? He starts to insinuate, or really allege, I should say, that Black people have a lower IQ than that of white people. And let me say this, I'm using the terms Black and white to reference what he wrote, because that is the term, or those rather, are the terms that he used. So please do not be one of those people that comes in here like, my sister, we not a color, we not Black. Don't do that. Okay, that's not what we're doing. We're using the terms Black and white as they are used in his manifesto so that we can delve into the manifesto. Okay. We're not going to have this existential conversation about whether or not our skin is Black. Obviously, our skin is not Crayola crayon black, right? It's brown, but we're not going to do that today. So now here he has this little infographic that he calls the truth about race. I'm going to look at the chat for a moment, and because I think I'm missing a lot in the chat. Ooh, let me hop in. Deneen Bay says, wow, ignorance is bliss. Listen, I'm like, is he really going to explain away his own immigrant status? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Kimberly Callahan says, not one lick of sense. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Um, B Buccaneer says that the Americas was never a quote unquote white country. All right. Empress Kai says you cannot make what he said make sense. Listen, I was like, make it make sense. Make it make sense. How are you somehow more deeply rooted than anybody else? It just doesn't make sense. Deneen Bay, speak on it. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Real Talk TV says that allegedly the this young man was a cult follower. Um hmm. Hello to Terry the Notary Public. How are you? Real Talk TV would like to know, could his defense argue that he was brainwashed and under the control of a cult? Huh. They could argue that he was brainwashed, and they could argue mental health, and they could argue, insanity, and perhaps get him placed under mental treatment in some sort of mental institution. They could. Now, do I think that it'll work? I don't think it's likely to work, because this manifesto is so although the logic isn't really logicking. People say the math ain't mathing. Okay, the logic ain't logicking. But he's reasoning things out in this manifesto in a way that I think it would be difficult to argue that he really is insane. More so, he just has ideas that don't comport with, actual logic, but that doesn't necessarily go towards insanity. Let me see. Your transcript says 35 people in the chat, but only 13 likes. That can't be true. We're going to have a moment. I am going to open up my cell phone here, because I know that ain't true. Okay, all right. The likes are up. The likes are up. Okay, so everyone, if you're in the building, hit the like button. Y'all, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything, so why not? All right. Hello, James Harris. Uh-oh. Rocking with the Truth says it's learned behavior. Lock up mom and dad too. I don't know. I don't know. All right. So now I wanted to have this conversation about race. Okay, now let me say this. I am not a scientist. Okay, so I can only say things that I have read or heard from people who say they are scientists. Now, what I have gleaned from the actual scientist is that race, so your racial identity is in your DNA, right? This is true. But that race is allegedly only about 2% of your DNA. Now, I could be wrong. Again, I'm not a scientist. But from what I have seen and heard from people who allege to be scientists, race is only about 2% of your DNA. So, this entire argument here where people try to, and I'm not going to say people, where this young man here tries to insinuate that we are so vastly different because of race, that there is a because he does argue in this manifesto that, in his opinion, Black people are subhuman. To make that argument, knowing that we are only 2% different, to me, sounds off. Okay, to me, it's a very, very off concept to say that with a 2% difference, you now have human and subhuman. But this is his belief. And this is where he sets forth all of those quote unquote beliefs and all the evidence that he believes supports that. Okay, then he gets into violent crime. Okay, now he says some things that are, I'm going to warn you, he says some things that could be offensive. Okay. He says some things that could hurt your feelings. I've said before, and I'm going to say again, my channel is not for children. I don't know why anybody would ever think it is, but I'm going to be clear. This channel is not for children. Okay. So if you're not 18 years or older, you shouldn't even be here. Now, again, if you think that you may be triggered by this, you may be prone to being offended by this, then you can leave with love. All right. So here's what he believes. He believes that Black people are more prone to Black people are more prone to psychopathy. I literally had to. This is going to be hard to get through. Black people are more prone to psychopathy and less capable of empathy than whites. Well, one moment, y'all. Okay. Black people are 80% more likely than whites to neglect their children. Black people have less moral understanding than whites. Black people are more reckless than white people. Black people are twice as likely to subject their children to severe violence than whites. Black women are twice what? Black women are more than twice as likely as white women to abuse their husbands. What? Black youth are 2.5 times as likely as white youth to have R-word someone. Black people are more likely to kill their spouses than other races. Black people are 50% more likely to cheat on their spouses. Where did he get this alleged information? Than whites. And Black people have less perseverance than other races. Wow. Black people are more likely than whites to be narcissistic. Black people are over 100 times more likely to R-word a white woman than vice versa. And he goes on and on and on. And again, we read these things. Why? Because it supports the elements of a hate crime. He specifically had an idea that a certain group, right, i.e., Black people, are his target. He then sought out that group. He then targeted them with an act of violence. So, really, we shouldn't even be having a conversation about whether or not this was a hate crime, because at this point, we have so much supporting elements of, or should I say, evidence of the elements of a hate crime. Now, to address some of the things that were said here, there are some statements being made here that are very, very difficult to support. So I'm not sure where the support for these things have come from. Case in point, The statement that Black people are more prone to psychopathy and less capable of empathy. How on earth would you find scientific evidence for that? Where would you get that? Where would you acquire scientific evidence of that? Okay. Black people have less moral understanding than white people. Where would you get scientific evidence to back that up? This is literally, these are literally assumptions he pulled out of his own mind. Black people are more reckless than whites. Again, how would you quantify that? How would you prove that? So, back to my original statement on the legal side of this all, this is quintessential hate crime. This young man developed in his mind assumptions about Black people that led him to then target Black people. And those assumptions, from what we are seeing, are not even rooted in logic. All right. A lady says, looks like he has references. Honey, those references are, listen, let's click this one. So you can't see it, but I've clicked a reference, right? And this is a 2002 study. Now, if you can sit here and give me all of these assumptions, and then you give me a reference that takes me to a 2002 study, what are we talking about here? We're now in 2022. You're quoting 2002 studies 20 years later? Oh, please. Kafooey. Kafooey. All right, so I am going to put the StreamYard link in the chat. It is now 9:30. Y'all, Supreme Court is going to happen tomorrow, hopefully, because it's not happening tonight. But the StreamYard link is in the chat. Come on up and have a discussion with me. Tell me what you think about anything that we've discussed tonight. If you want to talk about Texas, we can talk about Texas. If you want to talk about Buffalo, we can talk about Buffalo. If you want to talk about this manifesto, if you want to talk about gun control, right? Whatever it is you'd like to discuss, you're welcome to come on backstage. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. And if no one comes backstage in the next few minutes, then I'm going to head on out. Oh, Nappy Yankee said something interesting. So Nappy Yankee says, he clearly doesn't have a mind. So guess where he really pulled it from? I don't know, Nappy Yankee. Come backstage and tell us, or tell us in the chat. Totally up to you. But where do you think he pulled it from, Nappy? Oh, shoot, you guys, I've been talking this whole time and I was muted. I was muted and talking to you guys the whole time. Nappy Yankee, why don't you tell us where he really pulled his ideas from? We have Kim who just joined us. Kim, welcome to Empowered Esquire TV.
Hi.
Hello. So tell
Can
us
I,
what's on your mind.
I can be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, shoot, you guys, I've been talking this whole time and I was muted. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me see. I think I need to mute.
Yes, you need to turn that down.
Okay. Do I have it right?
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you again, Empowered Esquire, for having me. I really like your show a lot. Um, I'm just saddened by both the situation in Buffalo and the situation in Uvalde, Texas. It's just sad. Um, as far as this person in Buffalo that did the shooting or is alleged to have done the shooting in Buffalo, in a way, I want to be very angry with him, and I am, because of the illogic. Um, I've heard people talking about this thing called the replacement theory, in which he thinks that Black folks and immigrants and other people of color are going to replace white people. And I think that that is a fear that comes from shifting populations in certain areas. There are more black folks, brown folks, mixed race folks, who are in school now than there are white folks in school now, for example. Um, but it saddens me in a way because he was so young. He was only 18 years old. Um, Still impressionable. I don't know who got a hold of this boy and led him down this dark path. So in that way, I do feel sad. On the other hand, I do feel angry because he killed people. I mean, he just killed people who are just going about their life, going to the supermarket. I mean, my goodness. And the people he killed were older people, which is really ironic because of this whole replacement theory he was talking about. These people were probably not going to have any more children. You're talking
Right,
about people in their 70s and 80s at the supermarket buying groceries. I mean,
right.
it just didn't make sense. And then when I didn't even read the manifesto. I didn't want to read it because I knew it was just going to be a bunch of nonsense, and I just didn't want to cloud. I didn't want to populate my brain with it. I just couldn't do it. Um, it's sad for that young man who has been so misled that he did this horrible, horrible act. And so in that sense, I do feel sorry for him. Um, but he did a horrible act and he needs to pay the price for it. And the same thing with this young man in Texas. I mean, he's an 18-year-old young man who did a horrible, horrible thing, killing children in school. That's just not, it just makes no sense at all whatsoever. I just feel sad for young folks who just get led down these dark paths for whatever reason or another. But
You know, no,
go
no, go
ahead.
ahead.
The overarching thing to me is that had these people not had access to this kind of weaponry, we may not be discussing this, or at least we wouldn't be discussing this to. I mean, I don't think these situations would have happened if these young men had not had access to this kind of military style weaponry. So I do think something needs to change in terms of gun control laws and who is allowed to have weapons and what kind of weapons they're allowed to have. I am not anti-gun. I am pro responsible gun ownership. And I believe part of responsible gun ownership may have to be, you know, a registry limiting the type of weapons that, regular everyday folks can get. Maybe, having to go take a class, having to, register. I have to register my car in order to be able to drive it legally. So maybe we need to register our weapons. I mean, these are just ideas that I'm throwing out. I'm not saying I have answers. I'm just throwing ideas out. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I wanted to mention when you mentioned Texas and that these were elementary school children. So a lot of people have been saying that the alleged shooter in Texas, he was bullied and he went through a lot in his high school and you
Mhm.
know, but Kim brings up the most important point to that in my opinion, which is this was an elementary school. So no one is saying that perhaps the alleged shooter wasn't bullied or mistreated or whatever, but how does that correlate to killing elementary school children? It just that does not comport. Now, Columbine was one of those cases in which, people said, well, they were bullied by the children in the school and so even though there of course was still such an atrocity attached to that, that argument had a logical flow. This narrative they're building now with that shooter in Texas being bullied and it doesn't flow logically because he decided to shoot elementary school children when he's 19 years old. So I am going to add, we have someone else backstage. Hello to I always wonder if it's Q.
QI.
Oh, it's QI. Okay.
Uh-huh.
To QI Film Media.
Yeah, it stands for Quigualtam Indian because I am a Mayan. We were black, so I'm an indigenous, dark skinned Paleo American. Um, but what I wanted to say was his teacher or his cult leader, as well as the Buffalo shooter, was Carlson from Fox News. Uh, Tucker Carlton. I'm getting tongue tied. Often speaks on race theory, and that's where a lot of those ideas come from. He's often spoke of, where, like, white people were getting replaced, but he's looking at it the way he present it is a political thing, like, numbers count when it comes down to politics and voting and different things, and so that's the way he presents it. But if you're not a sane minded person, then of course you're gonna think some other things. As well, there are a lot of other cults, like, a lot of people think that Manosphere is just a black group, but they have white Manosphere and black Manosphere, and in these groups they're talking about things because it's like a push for power. It's like a male on male push for power at the end of the day. At the end, it's sword fights, and they're often bringing up political, political issues and things of that nature, and a lot of people are not taking the things. A lot of people are not taking this information in critically, and a lot of the information also is wrong, because if they go by accurate, like you just said, they're using old statistics and data, and a lot of different things, anything to prove their point. So like, we have to, I mean, just be aware of these groups out here, especially if you have sons. Beware of who's, because they may seem very intelligent or whatever, but be careful of who's influencing your children.
Absolutely. I agree with QI on that. Be careful of who's influencing your children. Be careful of what you are teaching your children. And I say that because parents tend to think that what they teach their children is what they tell them. And that's false. What you teach your children is what you are doing. Your children will emulate what you are doing more than they will ever listen to what you say. So you have many, many parents who will say that they don't teach their children to be biased towards anyone, who will say that they don't teach their children prejudice, but then they live that and the children see that. So,
And also,
yes,
you got to look at, like, Nature Boy. Nature Boy influenced a lot of young minded people. A lot of young minded people. We have to, like, we're in the information age. We're like social media all day long, and we're not accustomed to how social media is influencing people. And like, we had an older guy in New York, and then we have this young man who, this young guy who did this also in New York. We have, like, it age you everybody doesn't have critical thinking skills, or like, or skills to be able to think outside, rationalize the information that's given. So we have to look at that. A lot of this stuff is coming by way of the internet. And I digress from here, and that's all I want to say. I love you, Empowered Esquire, and keep up the good work.
thank you very much. I love you too. And thanks for being here. Nappy Yankee, you are up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just saying in the chat, the guy, I said, is this going to be a G-rated move from a G-rated program to an R-rated program? Because I was basically saying he pulled those stats out of his behind. But but basically, first of all, I feel absolutely no sympathy for any of the killers. All right, the guy in Buffalo knew what he was doing. He drove clearly with all the problems in the country. I mean, obviously, gas prices are high as hell. That didn't deter him from driving 3 freaking hours, 3 hours, all right, up to Buffalo in New York, and he cased the place as well. That's another thing I mentioned. He cased this place knowing that these people were soft targets. All right, soft targets. I have no. And listen, so many times I've heard people say that Trayvon Martin deserved what he got, that Mike Brown deserved what he got. All right, that they're guilty. Those guys didn't go out spraying that, and laying down a group of innocent people. So why should I feel sorry? And some of those guys weren't even of age. They weren't even 18. All right, this guy's a full 18-year-old man, and I have no sympathy for dude at all. All right, nor do I. I mean, obviously in Texas, you know, again, you know, soft targets, kids who aren't even thinking on that level. They're not. I mean, these are two groups that aren't even thinking on the level of warfare. They're just like, you got older people who are going out there just basically living their life and getting groceries and going back home. And then you got kids who don't even know what's going on in the world yet. And that's who you choose as their target. So I have no sympathy for them. It's strictly for the victims of these crimes. Now, I myself, I know what should be done to that guy in Buffalo. Obviously, the person in Delaware, in Texas is deceased, thankfully. But you just said something interesting about the parents. All right. Understand his parents. I'm not saying they told him to go out and do it, but remember the Crumleys. Remember the Crumleys. Remember how they were giving their kid a Christmas present of guns, right? They had very strong influence, and they sit at the dinner table and listen, whether it's through the news or whatever, maybe they watch Fox. Look, they talk about race around their table just like we do, and they look at black folks and they say, look at these, such and such, and you got to protect yourself. The parents definitely had a big influence on them. Please. So they're both engineers in the government. My opinion, fire them both, make them culpable, and hire 2 black engineers to work at their jobs. All right. I think that you're never going to stop guns in this country. I gave the idea of, maybe waiting until you're 25, but there is such a thing as a black market. This country is capitalistic. They're not going to stop. It's like drugs and alcohol and everything else. They're not going to stop the sale of guns to minors. But I think if you hit people in their pocketbook and you hit their jobs, then things will start changing a little bit. So to the parents, again, they found their social media. They gave their son guns at 16. 16. So my opinion that they're culpable, obviously you got to take them to court to prove it. But, once you start doing that and going after the parents and hitting their pocketbooks and hitting their life, then maybe things are going to change a little bit. And, that's basically what I had to say on that.
Nappy, you make a good point. You make a very good point when you say that if the parents are held more culpable, we might have more movement towards having some sort of headway in this type of behavior. Because as you're saying, gun control, which is what we discussed, what really does gun control do? Because when you look at places where guns are heavily restricted, like Chicago, you don't see a decrease in gun violence.
Nope.
So, you know what, Nappy Yankee, you make a very good point. I think if parents are held more culpable, then we may see some change. And you know what? That may apply to everything and not just when it comes to violent crime. I mean, that may also apply to education. I mean, if parents were held more culpable for the continued education of their children, then young people would have lower student loans. Like, you wouldn't have people graduating law school with $200,000 in loans because parents, I mean, especially parents of color, and people are going to get so upset when I say this, but it is what it is. Parents of color are the only parents I've ever seen have a child in college or in law school and their lifestyle does not change. They have the child taking out loans on loans on loans, and they're still driving luxury cars and it's very interesting to me. And it's the
Listen,
norm for them to have their child take on all these loans. Whereas in other cultures, I see parents tightening up the belt strap. Oh, my daughter's in college, my daughter's in law school, so we're not vacationing as much because we're putting her through.
you know
So,
why? You know why I think that's happening? Because it just brought to mind something I saw in the news. Um, this is just a segue, but it kind of adds to your point. Tyrese, the singer, bought his daughter, who graduated from the eighth or ninth grade, a Rolls Royce. All right. Um, Tyrese is, if you've followed the history, just like back and you've seen the crying meme of Tyrese, he's a person who's constantly trying to prove that he's a great dad. So I guess, and that's kind of on a bigger level because he's a celebrity, but you see it amongst us. I think that's kind of what plays into why, they don't want to downgrade. They don't want to seem like they're dusty or they're not, I think that plays into it. And that's why the lifestyle doesn't change, where you just want to show that, listen, I'm taking care, and you see it online. If you, you know, on social media, yeah, I'm taking care of my kids and they're still leveling up and blah, blah, blah. I think that's kind of is why that you see that happening, and it is unfortunate. I'm not saying all of it, because some of us, there are some of us who don't go that route, but some of us do, and I think that's probably why the reason why you see that.
The other thing I think that speaks to that, and I don't know if this is, you know, generational wealth. Some people, some cultures, some folks have generational wealth, so they can afford to send their kids to medical school and law school without them having to take out all kinds of loans.
Yeah,
right, generational wealth
definitely.
is, of course, a part of it, but I'm discussing regular families who do not have generational wealth, who, as I said, tighten up their own budget to put their children through. And I've
Yeah, I get it.
observed,
I
right,
get
I've
it.
observed the difference there, and I've noticed that I don't really see that with parents of color. And
Yeah,
by
I get
well,
it.
let me be real, I
Yeah,
don't
they
see that
don't.
with black parents. Y'all are gonna get
Yeah,
mad. It is what it
no,
is. I
no, I
don't
get it.
see black
I get it.
parents doing that. I see Asian parents selling homes to put their children through. That's not
Yeah,
generational wealth. That's we
yeah,
came from Vietnam or wherever, we worked our butt off for this house, but now our daughter needs to get through, right?
yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen Hispanic families move in with extended family to
yeah.
lower living expenses to put their children through. I don't see black
Right,
families doing that.
right. I
I,
understand.
I think it's the social engineering. And again, I mean, people, this is why I'm so anti celebrity, okay? Because they have a very strong influence on some of the things that we do. I mean, everybody wants to be Puffy, not realizing, you know, that Puffy is a guy who has a lot of money. But I do think
Yeah.
a lot of social engineering through the celebrities. This is why it's not that I hate them. All right. I mean, they're there for a
Well,
purpose, but it's just the fact that the idol worship and you try to emulate these people and you're not in the same income bracket. And
right,
I think that's what plays into it.
right. You can't model your life after folks like Puffy or whoever, you know, because we don't. That's not the lifestyle that most people are living.
A
Most
lot of
people, a
a
lot,
lot of them
most
may be
people at
broke
any rate,
themselves.
they might be, and we just don't see it because we just see what they show us. You know,
Yeah,
we don't.
yeah.
We may
Can
not
you
see
say
what's
it
really
louder?
going
Can you say it louder for the parents in the back who think that they are P. Diddy? Say it louder for the parents in the back. You are
A,
not P. Diddy.
right.
So
So yeah, we can't try to live the lifestyle of a P Diddy because we don't have P Diddy money.
there you go. There you go.
We have to live within our means. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
but as far as
Absolutely.
gun, I wanted to say to Nappy Yankee that I did take in his points as far as gun control, and not necessarily feeling sorry for. I don't know, because I'm an older person. I have nephews that are like 18, you know, and not that I see these shooters as my nephews, but they are in the same age range as my nephews. And I know my nephews do. I mean, they're kids basically, but they're not kids with access to this kind of weaponry. I don't know, it's like
just think back when you were a kid. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But hold on. Did you ever even think of grabbing an assault weapon and spraying people like that? I mean, and
No,
I and keep in mind, he wrote that manifesto. So it's
he
not
did.
you can throw the insanity out the window.
Yeah.
He
Oh no,
knew
I don't think he's insane. I don't think he's
no.
mentally ill. I think he was
Yeah,
very deliberate about what he was doing.
of course.
And I'm
I
not
mean to drive
painting at
drive him there.
all what
So
he did.
nobody. I mean, when I listened to NWA and Ice Cube and stuff as vulgar as I didn't go out and try to gank somebody. I don't even know how to do a ganking. I don't even know the process of how
Right.
to gank anybody. All right,
Right.
or Luke or Luke. I didn't try to do that.
Right.
So
Neither did
there,
I.
it's funny. He came from a two-parent household.
Right.
All right. Isn't that something they try to shame black people with all the time? Like, or
Yes.
out of wedlock kids and this and that.
Yes.
And this is why
Yes. Yes.
he
Yes. All of
came
the
from a
above. Yes.
two-parent household and his parents were engineers for the government.
Yeah.
So
They were.
there is
Yeah.
no excuse. It is amazing. I'm not going to name the names because I don't mess with either side, Democrat or Republican. But let's deal with
Right.
the black Republicans. It just makes me want to vomit.
Oh.
You're gonna sit there and try to make excuses for this,
Well, I've
even
heard them
bring up.
say everything from like, oh, it's that rap music,
Oh
or
God.
it's the video games, or it's the internet, and it's like, well, my goodness, there are kids all over the world that listen to rap music. There are kids all over
Someone
the world that have access to the internet. There's
one of the
kids
late
all over the world
mhm,
that play video games.
one of the
The
late
United
night
States is the only country I know of that has these mass shootings. Like it's like,
one of
okay,
the
it's
late
just another day.
one of the late night comedians made an excellent point. I forgot who it was. Maybe Stephen Colbert or whatever. He's
Uh-huh.
saying he made the point that listen, if you think the rap music and the video games are violent images, check out some of their campaign ads for some of these Republicans. I mean,
Oh
those
yeah,
guys, check out their campaign ads.
yeah.
So it's just, but
It's all
again,
excuses. It's just all excuses. It's not. None of this has anything to do with the boy that drove to Buffalo or the boy that shot up the school in Texas. It's it's
but yeah, I mean, but again,
it's not any
mhm.
of that stuff. It's just that it's a huge problem. No, I don't think anybody really knows the answer. And I do think that there's some gun control needed, although I do take your point that there's always the black market.
Here's the answer for what happened in Buffalo, which obviously was racially motivated again. And shout out to the security guard who did what he was supposed to do. Okay,
Yeah.
but the guy was wearing he couldn't crack through that shell,
Right.
and unfortunately he died. But he did what he had to do.
Right.
But and again, these are older people.
Hmm.
He just like the punkified Dylan Ruth went in he even wrote Dylan Ruth wrote in his manifesto, I got to go after a soft target. He's not going to walk through the hood. He get or somewhere where he knows he's going to get capped. But
Right. He's gonna go
but
after either kids or old folks in the grocery store.
yeah, and
You
I
know.
don't. And just a side note, these guys are talking about starting a race war. I mean,
Ugh.
hold on a second. But steel sharpens steel. Aren't you gonna? Don't you go up to the bully to test your metal? I mean, you're gonna. I mean, it just none of the psychology of this
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But
So if you're
but the
gonna
bot,
try to prove a point, you're gonna go up to the biggest, baddest mofo you can find to prove your point.
yeah,
Right.
you
You're
That's
know,
not
what I
gonna.
was saying about the shooter in Texas as
Right.
well. If
Right.
you were being bullied by other students when you were in high school, what
Right.
point are you proving by killing elementary schoolers?
Right.
I don't know the mentality, but the bottom line is this. You know that the guy in Buffalo did it. Swift justice. I mean, I would cement shoe that dude and just toss him in like whatever, like New Orleans. And I'm dead serious. Like in New Orleans where the alligators are, and just let him get eaten alive. I mean, that he did it. It would save tax dollars because as long as he's there, black people, all right, are spending tax dollars to keep this guy, feed this
To
guy, and
feed them.
everything.
Yeah.
You
To keep
understand?
them alive.
So
Yeah.
I would. That's one thing I would do. I would get those parents. I would fire them from their job. Put two black people there to work there. Take away their house. All right, that's what I'm just telling you what I would do. I know this is all, Pollyanna, and I know that, again, they're not going to do it, and they're going to find a way, in my opinion, to make this guy mentally ill. But I'm just saying what I would do, because obviously it's a race crime. Obviously, there's not. I mean, do you? Let me ask you this, Felicia. Do you have? Do you still have to prove that this was race based? Do you still have to go through a court and prove this was race based?
Yes, they will have to, if they want to charge him with a hate crime, yes, they will have to in court prove. Now, it shouldn't be hard, right? It shouldn't be that big of a hill to climb, but
Right.
they
He
Right.
will
gave
have
them
to
he gave
prove
them all
that
the evidence they need.
right.
I,
He pretty much gave it to them, but they
we've
will
Yeah.
seen
still have to address that. Yes.
we
Yeah.
we've seen this before, where they somehow those guys do slither out if you get a decent enough lawyer. I mean, you and we. I mean, I know that there are people out there that are fans of what this dude did. People with money will probably send them money. I don't know. I just don't have any faith that that somehow they will find some way to get him to slither out of the hate crime. Now, obviously, he murdered 8 people, so I don't think he's going anywhere. But then again, Kyle Rittenhouse, he got off, and what he did was on camera. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just, maybe there's some legal loopholes that I'm missing here, but he got off, and he went out there, and what he did was totally illegal. He just he went across state lines with a gun and basically deputized himself and shot people, and
Yeah.
he got off. So
Yeah.
I just
He
I don't know.
inserted himself into that situation.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I just don't have any faith in what's going to happen. I'm hoping for the best, but I don't know.
Right. I can understand your apprehension, but in this instance, as I said, he's really handed it to them here. So I don't have that much doubt that they'll be able to prove the targeted a certain racial group portion of the hate crime here.
Hmm.
Okay, well, listen,
Well,
good show.
let's hope for the best.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
show. You will be on tomorrow with the Supreme Court, correct?
Yes,
Oh,
hopefully.
what's happening tomorrow?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
do it tomorrow. It's 10 o'clock. We know that I am not. First of all, I barely made it through this one. Okay, I'm halfway asleep by now.
Oh
Well,
goodness.
So
okay.
I have to enjoy my weekend, and I sure
All
Yeah.
haven't.
right. Well,
What's happening
listen, don't.
briefly? Can you tell us what's happening tomorrow with the Supreme Court? Just real brief.
Yes, so tomorrow I'm going to be addressing the Supreme Court recently addressed how much a federal court can review a state criminal conviction, particularly when you have someone arguing they did not have proper counsel. So I don't know how familiar you are, Kim, with
Oh, yeah. I
yeah,
think
with
I've
what
heard
happens
something
when
about
someone
that.
is convicted of a crime. But when you get
Yeah.
convicted of a crime, in a state court, you can request federal review and you can say,
Uh-huh.
I did not have effective counsel, meaning that
I
you did
heard
not have
something
your
about that.
constitutional right. And so the Supreme
Yeah.
Court reviewed that and they did a significant rollback on that, pretty much saying that it's limited in how you're able to argue that you did not have effective
Now,
counsel.
isn't this a case based somewhere where someone's on death row?
Yes, this is a death row case.
And I think they subsequently learned that there was what they call exculpatory evidence. But they're saying what the Supreme Court is trying to say, if I understand properly, is that even if you find exculpatory evidence, meaning evidence that would prove that the person didn't do it, that after a while it's just too late. We're just going to wash our hands of it, and it's too late, even if we find evidence they didn't do it at all.
Well, I'll review it in depth tomorrow, but
Okay.
more than what you're saying, which I can understand why that's kind of what you would come away from it with. But
Yeah.
I think more so what they're saying is that the federal review process is limited when it comes
Okay.
to reviewing what happened with the interaction between an attorney and a client in a state conviction. That's
I
really what,
I
and
see.
if you notice, there's a trend here, right?
Mhm.
SCOTUS is rolling back on big government. And that is obviously because we have right now a more conservative SCOTUS.
Yeah.
So you can see that
So
with
I'll just
everything.
listen
Same
for
thing
it
they just did
tomorrow.
with, yeah, it's the same thing they just did with pregnancy termination, right? It's the same
Yeah.
thing. They are rolling back how much federal government is involved in state government dealings. And they're doing that really across the board.
Okay. I'll just
All
listen
right.
for it tomorrow. If I don't catch it live, I'll catch the replay.
All righty,
All
All
everyone.
right.
right.
So
Yeah, don't have too many drinks at the barbecues tomorrow. All right. And also let me say this too. This past week, Kate Moss gave some very, very damaging testimony to in that case for Miss Heard. So,
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
sure eventually. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if you've been keeping up with
yeah,
it, but
I saw a portion of it where she pretty much said that Johnny Depp did nothing to her. Like it wasn't his
yeah.
fault at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so doesn't look good for Miss Heard, but I'm sure you'll keep up
Oh,
with
that's a
that, and
mess.
yeah, that's a mess right there. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Have a good night, and
Good night, Nappy Yankee. Good night,
thanks.
Right.
Peace, y'all.
Miss Felicia, Attorney Felicia. I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you. Absolutely. Peace
I'm
to
gonna
both
I'm
of
gonna
you.
step down. Good night, everybody.
Have a wonderful night. Alrighty, everyone. So thank you for joining me for yet another installment of Empowered Esquire TV. I hope you've been empowered by the legal information shared today. You bring something unique to this world, to this channel, to my life, and I love you for that. So, what's up, Replay Gang? I have questions for you, of course. Tell me, what do you think about the measures that were taken in Texas? Do you agree that maybe some things could have been done differently, or do you think they did the best they could? What do you think about federal agents being there, but still the local police decided to take charge as opposed to allowing the federal agents to take charge? And what do you think about this Buffalo shooting and this manifesto? Do you believe that this manifesto will be sufficient to prove that really what happened in Buffalo was a hate crime? What do you think? Let me know. And I will see you next time.